Can I ask really quickly, who's heard of Sustainable Table? Holy heck, that was not... You know what, uni go through a quick and everyone will not put their hand up. I thought I was going to have to say, well, this is what we are. So maybe I'll do that in a really, really brief form. Thanks, Pip. So I come with filthy fingernails because I'm also a farmer. I come a bit exhausted because I've just got to the end of our berry picking season. And I come sort of exhausted but equally elated by what we're doing at Sustainable Table. So the really formal bit of what we do is that we bring together courageous eaters, growers, leaders and aligned, and that bit's really key, funders to the same room to have conversation about how we rapidly change our food system to become a regenerative one. And when they asked me to be that, and I love the way I was introduced as currently the CEO, that's a good way to describe me because I change tact pretty regularly. Who knows how long I'll be there, but let's see. For now, it's an amazing group of female thinkers. Pretty small team, but we are national. And we work in 3 different ways. And we don't want to be all things because there are some amazing people doing bloody amazing things in this sector. And I'm only just getting my head really around what's going on in the grain, the emerging grain projects. But what we do isn't everything, but we do storytelling. We have an incredibly small but dynamic team of storytellers. One of them is here today and she's going to be talking to as many of you as possible so that we can shout from the rooftops the brilliant magic that's being created by you guys, whether you're growing it, whether you're milling it, whether you're creating beautiful things to feast on with your hands. We tell stories. We have an industry development team, and again, it's small, but they are bloody mighty, and they're really about understanding from you what the hell's going on. What we don't want to do with our 3rd pillar, which is sprinkle money around, we don't want to sprinkle money ad hoc, and we don't want to sprinkle money in a way that services our needs, because who the hell are we to know what you need, when that doesn't actually meet your needs. So we work really, really closely with industry to understand what the levers are and what the blockages are and what the problems are in what you're seeing every single day and what need to be amplified or tweaked and enabled. So we do those 3 things. I did write myself some notes because I thought I could go absolutely anywhere. We have been on the ground for about 13 years. And really we began as a consumer education organisation based out of Victoria. And at the time that was really necessary. We might have had maybe one of your series, Fat Pig Farmer, on the ground by then, 13 years ago. But we didn't have many people talking to consumers about what their role is, about the fact that they needed to reckon with the reality of the world that we lived in, and the fact that as eaters, we could make a decision 3 times a day or more, if you're a 16-year-old twin, as the case may be in my household, to really impacting the future of the world that we're living in for our children and our grandchildren. And so it was really necessary at the time to have an organisation that would carry some of that load and put content out there that supported people. Because as you know, can I just get a really quick hand actually? Who is a grower? Who is a processor? Righto. Who is a baker? Who's doing all of it? Yeah. Yeah, so you guys wear so many hats that some of those pieces of the pie need to be sort of taken off your plate. So at the time when Sustainable Table was doing the storytelling as a predominant focus, it really had a role. But you jump on Google now and you'll find a million different reasons or ways to become an ethical eater if that's what you think you need to be as a consumer. And so we stopped being as relevant as we were and we needed to really shift gears. And what we were hearing was that there was this need for financial enablement, cash. And so we worked with a really small handful of philanthropic funders who were mostly Victorian-centric, and we identified a particular region and we worked closely with some government agencies who also co-funded, and it was mainly around the Mornington Peninsula region. And over about a 4-year period, we funded 45 different projects at a very grassroots level. We went to the industry, we heard from them, they told us what they needed, we put money in their back pocket and we worked out how to join all of those itty-bitty dots into what would essentially become systemic change. And what we saw over just a very short amount of time with just a very relatively small amount of money was genuine systemic change. People ask us all the time, how did you measure that? And Matthew sort of talked then about some of the sort of measurement tools. And really, you can put all of this complex scientific hoopla in the way, but the reality is that still the best way to tell things is with the human palate. It's a little bit the same with impact measurement. The best way to understand the impact or the outcome of something is to ask the people that are actually on the ground with their hands in the dirt, living it, breathing it every day. Is this viable? Is it working? Are we seeing change? Are you deeply observing and noticing a difference? You know, if humanity is this long, it's just been this tiny little bit up here that has gone back to science and asked us to give us black and white statistics. The rest of the time we lent into the fact that we are custodial species that use our head and our heart and our hands and tell us what it is that's working or not working. We have ancestral knowledge within all of us. And actually it's that stuff that comes back to one of the hardest things to do, and we were having a conversation just before we started talking this morning. It doesn't matter how much magic we create or what change we're trying to bring, the hardest thing we will do is work out how to interact with each other. Anyone else exhausted by that? Yeah. But it's also the most magical thing that we will do. And so for those of us who are brave enough or courageous enough, as we use that word in our mission statement, to really take that head on, we're trying to find ways to connect those that are creating magic and bringing change. Because it's bloody hard, but we do know how to do it because we did do it once. It was the only thing that meant thrival and survival or not surviving, and that's how to interact with each other. The thing is, Sustainable Table then moved into this sphere about 2.5, 3 years ago where our role in the whole ecosystem was to bring funding cash in all of its various forms to the table to those who are doing things that are currently being blocked by the current system. But what happened was that we discovered that fundamentally the financial system is based on extraction. That's really tricky when the people we actually need to be working with are the farmers who are building everything around a paradigm of regeneration. Not only are the languages not the same thing, the expectations and the outcomes aren't the same thing. So we didn't have a bridge. So as we were building our team and as we were building our understanding and going from a small localised area in Victoria to become a national organisation, we undertook a piece of research that we call the Regenerative Investment into Food and Farming Research. We do have an amazing comms team, but we didn't get a snappier title than that. We call it the RIF. So if I'm talking about the RIF, that's what I'm talking about. And Robert, who's going to jump up here in one of those seats in a minute, will talk a bit more about that on our panel. But what we discovered was that we could build a bridge. We can actually find a way to get investors or philanthropists slowly to understand why we actually need to move away from extraction in our investment system to be able to find a way to support our farmers. So our farmers, I don't know if any of you had a look at the National Farmers Federation stats just recently. These stats are kind of frightening, but one of them was that 33% of our farmers in the last 12 months have considered self-harm or suicide. Fuck. Let's take a deep breath and think about the reality of that for a minute. Like, that is frightening. 75% of these poor buggers, and I'm one of those, don't feel like the food that we're producing is valued and that the work that we're doing on a Sunday and on a public holiday without getting paid extra isn't valued. So why the hell would we continue to do it? But they do, and they do because food, just like Matthew said a minute ago, is foundational. It's absolutely foundational to our very existence. So if we take a step back, and you were all in the room when Matthew just spoke a minute ago, we need to understand the soil. We need to understand what the hell a nematode is. Like, we need to be able to not only understand it, but celebrate it through all of the steps of the supply chain. Having worked in food systems now for sort of 10 or 12 years and being a farmer myself, the one area I've had almost nothing to do with is GrAiNZ, interestingly. it's kind of the last horizon in my understanding, and I think in many people's understanding, because often it sits in the supermarket as a 59-cent bag of black and gold flour, and it's not valued. But I reckon I can feel pretty safe that I'm in a room of people who shake their head and say, no bloody way, this is valued, it's foundational, it forms the majority of just about every meal the majority of us eat. So let's actually start talking about it and let's get excited about it. Let's find a way to fund it, let's find a way to celebrate it and tell the stories of it, and let's find a way to connect all of us who are doing it. It's not some massive commodity monoculture that sits out in Western Australia. It is that too, but it's not just that. And so Sustainable Table is undertaking these projects in a way that make them human, that make them alive, and we bring them to the table in a way that gets those that have got money, lots of it, to get excited about it too. We were talking about this yesterday and someone said, actually it was Tammy, he said, let's not call it capital. And she's right. You know, it is this really powerful tool, and it sucks that a massive group of people who are doing amazing things can't get access to it, while a very small group of people who aren't doing amazing things but happen to have a lot of it sitting in their bank account are holding it tight. So our role is to sort of crack that and change what that looks like. I haven't actually used my notes. This is always a bit worrying because I could go anywhere. A couple of years ago, when we managed to secure some of this precious philanthropic money, we had about $1.5 million in the bank, and that was just through 3 or 4 existing relationships with funders. And they said to us, you build a team of people who truly understand food systems, and then we'll have the confidence and the trust in you to go and find a heap of projects that need to be funded. So we have this incredible team, of which Robert is one of. Serenity Hill is another one. There's a few, just Tony Massey is another one. We put the word out and we said, we've got $1 million. If you've got an amazing regen project, tell us about it. We thought we might get 50 or 60 projects. We got nearly 300 projects in just a couple of weeks. Then we had to assess them all. But what it gave us was this beautiful helicopter view of Australia's food ecosystem. We got all of these amazing projects come out of the woodwork that told us that really didn't matter where you were or what sector you're in, we could probably gently nuance you into one of 7 boxes. It told us very clearly that we have these very strong sectors, and one of those was GrAiNZ. There was quite a lot of Indigenous-led GrAiNZ projects that came to our attention and quite a lot that weren't Indigenous, but regardless, it made us incredibly excited about working with people at all stages of the supply chain, and it made us realise that we actually needed to focus on exactly this, and we needed to find funders who wanted to focus on it as well. At about the same time, we undertook a project, I talked about the RIF, where we researched by speaking to 60 global leaders about projects that they were working on that were working. Because, I don't know, and you guys would be in this position, but you often come up with an idea and you think you'll trial it and you get shot down. I'm a regen apple grower on a plateau that used to have 35 family-owned farmers growing apples on that plateau, and now there are just 2 plus us, kind of 3 plus us. Those other 32 have all packed up, told their kids not to get involved, realised there's no money in it for small-scale family-owned farming, and buggered off and sold their properties to lifestylers because they made a whole lot more money by pushing their trees out. They do often live in the small town near us, and they continue to drive past us with their arms crossed, peering over their steering wheel. Those bloody weirdo hippies doing this weird stuff with curly rows and inter-row chaos, and it's a bloody mess. I wish they'd just weed or spray the shit out of their orchard to get it back in order. So yeah, it looks like a bloody mess. But what we discovered when we did the RIF project was that there are examples of success all over the country and all over the world, and if we could just identify some of those and share those really powerful stories, not just with each other so that we're all connected, not just with consumers so that they start to understand, and not just with investors so that they start to come on the journey with us. But with everybody, we could actually be visible. So a few things have come out of this. We've learnt that relationship is all. We kind of know that, right? You know that if a really good friend tells you to go and eat something or go and see a movie, you'll probably listen to them and do it. Well, it's kind of the same in farming and in funding of farming, as it turns out. So relationship is everything. And trust is critical to that. You can only move at the speed of trust. And when you're within a community, even if it's a virtual one or one that is brought together because you all have GrAiNZ hats on, you can only go as deeply and as quickly as the trust will allow and that community will allow. It's told us that if we don't go back to base and start listening to our Indigenous wisdom, with ancestral history that takes us back to 65,000 years, then we actually are building an agricultural system on a foundation that is fraught with potential of collapse sooner than not. We don't have to maintain this arrogance that we have the answers, because we don't necessarily have the answers, and we've seen in a lot of cases that we actually don't. We've got it wrong. It's okay to get it wrong. We've also learnt very strongly that we can't just make decisions, especially, and this is interesting for funders, using our head. We have to use our heart, and we have to be heart-led. And I think, for the most part, the people that get into regen ag understand that only too well, and so they connect. It's sort of like an unspoken language. Someone explained it to me this morning as the difference between sourdough bread and bread that's bought, or a packet mix. It's like, yeah, I kind of get that. That's a really good explanation. I'm definitely sourdough bread. So Sustainable Table is now in this really fortunate position with this piece of research that we've done. We are road showing it across the country, and we are having conversations with funders in every capital city. We've now done 4 of those capital cities, hence the fact I've got no voice, because we've been on the go for some time. The most wealthy of all of those funders joined us at a lunch table in Sydney 2 weeks ago, and he spoke at the beginning, and he talked about, he urged all the other funders in the room to consider the role that they had to enable those that were doing this absolutely noble work. And he's got a slightly pompous English accent, and I was sort of listening but sort of a bit sceptical as he was talking. And at the very end of our presentation, where we talked about the fact that there was a level of fear in all of us for the future and that we had to act really fast, that the IPCC has coined this term, the critical decade, and that we are 4 years into that. So we are rapidly hurtling to a place that many of us won't recognise. So we need to enact change right now. At the end of our presentation, he came up to me, he's quite a big man, and he put his arms around me and he had tears running down his cheeks, and he said, "Shit, it's just occurred to me that I am actually the keeper of a locked box, and I've got to unlock that box. And I've got to enable these people that are doing this work, because these people are actually our bloody heroes, and we need to listen to them and we need to be led by them. I can't assume that I have the knowledge. I thought I did until today, but actually I need to hear what it is you tell us they need." So I want to ask that question in the room right now. Sustainable Table does have an amazing comms team, an industry development team, and access to funds that are hopefully growing as we go. But we want to know from you what it is that you need from us. If we could put funds on the table, would that be enabling? Pop your hand up if that's the case. It's not for everybody. Like, some people are still a bit fearful of actually complexifying, funds. And if we were to put funds into your pocket, would that be for infrastructure? Yeah, there's some very straight hands here. Would it be for marketing? That's significantly more than I thought. Christy, I need your brain to absorb this too. Would it be for education? Still more hands than I thought. Right. Would it be for opportunities to come together and learn from each other? Yep. And do we want to do that in person, or are you happy to do that online? Or both? In person? Definitely the preference. Okay. What about resources? So if we were to put together, if we hear loudly and clearly, there are other amazing organisations doing similar things to this, but, if there are gaps and Sustainable Table has capacity to do it, are you likely to go to the internet and to websites for resources that are specifically for you? Yeah, quite a few nodding heads too. Righto, okay, we're going to be really busy in the next 2 years. Okay. Before I introduce 4 incredible humans, because I think I've probably talked enough, has anybody got any questions? Oh, the map. God, yes. Righto, forgot about that. I've got a big note on that notepad that I haven't looked at once. We did this discovery phase. We flashed all these amazing projects, got this high-level understanding of what the whole ecosystem looked like across the country and went, that is bloody amazing. We are now kings because we're empowered with knowledge. What we actually needed to do was share it with you. But we can't do that very, very easily because there's only one of me travelling the countryside talking with a microphone in my hand. So we've created this map over the last 6 months. It's free to be on the map. What we're really trying to do is enabling you in the way we've been enabled. We want to connect you to each other so that you leapfrog on each other's knowledge and you share openly. We only work with people who will share their knowledge in an open source way. So what we really want to do is make sure that you, if you're starting out, you can find someone else who's doing it and you can pick up the phone and you can connect with them and learn. We really want to share what you're doing with funders, because we want funders to understand, who say to us all the time, I've got $3 million, but I don't know where to put it. And we're like, shit, we can spend that for you. Just ask us. We need them to see you directly without a middleman if that's the easiest way, or with a middleman if they need someone that's trusted in the middle. But we need them to see you. They don't know about you. They don't know where to put their money. We also need consumers to see you, because we need them to understand that, if they've just moved to an area and they want to access ethically grown meat, they know how to do that. And so it's free to join. It takes about 40 minutes, and we've had a bit of pushback on this, but the reality is that, like any other word, regenerative has now been co-opted and it's somewhat greenwashed. We could move to agroecological. We haven't at this point, but there's definitely a fair bit of protection around the use of that word. The reason it takes you 35 or 40 minutes to fill in is because we ask you a whole stack of questions, and we do actually expect that you'll give us fairly solid and truthful, honest answers. We then assess you and you then get access. What we really want to be in a position to do is take a visual of what our ecosystem looks like, all of the projects that all of us are working on, and actually make that visible so that the politicians who are making legislative decisions that do actually have a trickle-down impact on us, whether we think we're outside the box or not, whether, so funders can see that this isn't just sort of some tin pot tinkering in the corner, but it's actually a massive movement and it requires a whole lot more support. And so that consumers can start to see that they're actually not on the train if they're not following this way of thinking and being. It's a whole paradigm shift. That's massive, and we're working on that with different groups as well, but none of us can do this alone. It's just at sustainabletable.org.au. Yes?
What's the name of that service?
It's just called the Regenerative... Thank you. See, I think we're not good at names. I think we need to work on that. Anyway, that's what it's called. It's on the Sustainable Table homepage. You'll find it, and it says join the map, click here. We're really hoping, we're about to do a PR push, and then we're going to start a political advocacy push. We're really hoping to have a very strong visual to take to government in the next few months. So if you have a network that you can push that out to, encourage everyone to be on it so that we can all see each other and we can give visibility to this. Any other questions? Yes?
Are you looking at funding to put covenants on agricultural land near suburbia to protect agricultural land?
In peri-urban areas. Yeah, we're definitely sitting on a number of working groups around peri-urban agricultural protection. I think it's inevitable. I think that will be where we go. We tend to fund the unsexy stuff, and that's somewhat unsexy. It is, some would argue, the responsibility of government to be doing exactly that. And whether it's that we're funding a covenant or that we're advocating for covenants to be applied, remains to be, and whether we do that or whether we find partners to do that, it definitely is on the radar. Yep. Yes?
Sorry, this is a bit counterintuitive, so I apologise if I get off more questions, but is there an avenue for funding to work on projects to change the model so funding is no longer required?
Yes. Yeah. So philanthropists spend their life saying, and will we have to be paying them again in 12 months' time and 12 months' time and 12 months' time? Sometimes the answer to that is yes, for a very good reason, because we actually need to fund system change, and that's very hard to get funding from a bank for. But yes, the idea is that we would be funding projects that are looking to build enough strategic direction to sort of climb themselves out of the situation. The projects that we tend to fund are the ones that are absolute edge dwellers that will never get funding because they are as innovative as all hell. We need those edge dwellers, and we need their bravery and their courageousness, because they're actually going to inform the rest of us that are following. And so we need to find those projects that are kind of the lever, so when you push them, they unravel a whole heap of other opportunities that other people can be involved with. So we call them our change lever projects, and sometimes we find them and go, oh, that will have a massive impact. If we can fund the first few stages of that, the flow-on effect is huge. But yes, but you know, there's a few organisations that I don't know how they would ever become self-funded. And so the reality is that someone needs to fund them because they can't burn out. We've got some incredible leaders in this space and they're all bloody knackered. So we actually need to fund it.
What are some examples of those organisations if they won't come themselves?
Yep. Farmer Incubator is probably a good one of those. Or Young Farmers Connect. They're both two quite good examples, and they both look after new farmer pathways, the box that we call new farmer pathways. And they both have capacity to be national. We're not just looking for projects of scale, we're also looking for projects that are replicable, and so it might be that the model works in one place and then it needs to be tweaked fairly significantly to be relevant in another place, but that there is still replication value. So we have funded them for capacity. There is nothing sexy about funding capacity. You get nothing out of it when the acquittal time comes and we have the conversation with us and they say, yeah, we did it. We operated. Great. They haven't fallen over, and this is critical because we've got to support these initiatives. Yep.
Is there data around what percentage of farmers are actually interested in regen agriculture?
All our advisors go, no. Look, anecdotally, when I go to these sorts of things and ask for a show of hands, I can tell you 95% of hands go up. It's very few that leave their arms crossed, and generally that's because they have an implicit distrust of the banking system, and so any investment feels like it comes with strings that are too hard to adhere to. I get that. The baseline debt model is not appealing to any farmer because you hit a bad year and you're buggered. So what we need to do is reframe what a debt-based model can look like for a vibrant agricultural system. It looks like long-term, really, really long-term. It looks like deep relationship in practice, so that if shit hits the fan, you've got the ability to sit around the table with your funders and say, we're 3 years into a drought year, can't do anything about it, sorry, you're not getting any repayments. It looks like humility at the table, where the farmer doesn't have to say, how high do I need to jump in order to maintain the dollars that you've put on the table because you now wear the pants, even though you've got no skills in this game. So it looks like an even power play at the table. I mean, that's harder to manage than you can imagine, but you know, our hope is that our role in this will be that we can dispel some of that mismatched power. And it looks like very, very small returns, because ultimately, as soon as you're looking at a return that is anything above about 4.5%, the person that probably is getting screwed is the farmer.
And so is the thinking more to suck change through the system from consumers or
Both.
from above?
Look, it's got to be both. And the reality is the consumer shift is something that just about every person in this sphere is working on, and it will be slow because it's tied implicitly in with cultural change. and we have an abundance mentality. We can have whatever we want whenever we want it at a price we're willing to pay. But the truth is that the true cost of food is buried in government subsidies and in ecological loss and in cultural loss and in community loss. So all of those costs are not actually shining through the true cost of food. So look, how that's going to roll out remains to be seen, but we do actually at some point need to acknowledge that the true cost of food needs to be paid for by someone. Yeah, thank you.
Is it worth mentioning just the difference of how farmers should be measuring success? Like not just consumers, but obviously how we measure profitability in the language for farmers as well. Because that's kind of related to that in terms of it's not about yield, it should be about profitability.
Yeah, that's true.
Actually making money rather than expectations of just more and more and more with higher ecological loss.
Did everybody hear that? I think I'm better off just giving you to say exactly that again.
No.
Go.
I think just to answer that question is more that I work with organic producers around the country, and I think more to change the language of how a farmer measures success, and rather than measuring by yield, which is what the conventional farming system measures success by, is actually measuring profitability per hectare and success per hectare rather on a better scale.
What is success anyway in farming, right? I mean, if you don't walk off your land, are you successful? You're still hanging in.